Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Edward always believed that happiness was built day by day. For him, there were no magic formulas or extraordinary moments. What mattered was the simple things: opening his grocery store early, greeting the neighbors, carefully restocking the shelves, and in the late afternoon, going home where Natalie would be waiting with a calm hug and some comment about a dog she had rescued. It was an unglamorous routine, but full of meaning. Their marriage was admired by most people in town. While he took care of providing for the household, she dedicated herself to abandoned animals with genuine passion. Many people found it beautiful. They said they were a couple that completed each other. Natalie was tireless. She lived surrounded by campaigns, adoption fairs, and partnerships with veterinary clinics. Sometimes, she came home exhausted, with muddy stains on her pants or the strong smell of medications used in rescues. She had stories to tell about animals saved at the last minute, about litters found in vacant lots, about dogs hit by cars that she helped rehabilitate. Edward listened with interest, even when tiredness pulled him towards sleep. He admired her strength, her sense of purpose. He never minded her absence on weekends or her late-night outings. He trusted her. In fact, this had always been the foundation of their relationship: mutual trust. When she said she was going to sleep at the shelter to monitor an animal in need of constant care, he wished her good night and locked the door from inside. For a long time, everything seemed stable. There was affection, respect, and although romance was no longer as intense as in the early years, there was a silent connection that sustained the bond. Edward didn't expect passionate declarations or elaborate surprises. Her presence beside him, the food ready on the table, the clean clothes in the drawer, all of that was love translated into practice for him. And seeing the sparkle in her eyes when she spoke of a rescued puppy was enough to warm his heart. That's why the first changes didn't catch much attention. A meeting outside regular hours, an emergency commitment on a Sunday, a call she answered more discreetly than usual. Nothing seemed alarming. He knew volunteer work could be demanding. And she spoke with such conviction that it sounded natural. But gradually, some pieces began not to fit. Certain stories repeated themselves with different names. She seemed distracted at home, more connected to her phone, less interested in conversation. The explanation was plausible. But the frequency of these situations increased. Edward tried to push away any negative thoughts. He told himself it was just stress and accumulated fatigue. And for a few weeks, he lived each day as if everything was fine. Until one Monday morning, while organizing the cash register at the grocery store, he received an unexpected visit. An old customer, Mrs. Martha, mentioned that she had left a donation of dog food at the shelter on Saturday night, but no one showed up to receive it. She said she waited for over 20 minutes and eventually left, worried about the animals. Edward was surprised. Natalie had said she stayed at the shelter that night precisely to take care of a dog suspected of having parvovirus. The customer's words didn't align with what his wife had reported. It was a simple detail, but enough to awaken a discomfort he could no longer push under silence. From the moment he heard the customer's comment, something changed within Edward. It was as if part of him had awakened from a long state of denial. He didn't say anything to Natalie that night. He simply observed. Observed how she arrived smiling, how she hugged the dogs upon entering the house, how she spoke about the shelter with enthusiasm, as if nothing was out of place. And that hurt. Doubt began to grow quietly, taking root. He had always been a calm man, but this time he couldn't pretend anymore that it was just his head playing tricks on him. The voice that once whispered now screamed. Then he decided he needed a concrete answer. One that would end that anguish once and for all. Either it would confirm that everything was a misunderstanding, or he would discover what lay behind Natalie's gentle eyes. In the following days, he tried to extract small bits of information discreetly. He asked where she had been, commented on the cases of animals she claimed to have rescued. He tested details. But Natalie seemed prepared. She responded calmly, citing names, times, places. Everything was believable. But the more she explained, the more he doubted. It was as if every word was carefully chosen, as if everything had already been rehearsed. So, on a Tuesday morning, Edouard searched the internet for investigation services. He wanted something discreet, without fanfare. He found the name of Charles Benson, a private detective with good recommendations. He called, set up a quick meeting at a cafe, and explained his case with objectivity. Charles listened attentively, took notes, and accepted the job. He said it would take only 3 days to get a concrete answer. Edouard spent those days as if living two worlds at the same time. At work, he served customers, organized the inventory, managed the cash register. At home, he kept the routine, answered his wife's questions normally, listened to her stories. But inside, all the while, his head weighed heavily. Every time Natalie went out, he checked the clock. Every time she came back, he tried to find something different. The perfume. The bag. The clothes. He searched for anything that might reveal more than she was saying. But everything seemed calculated, as if she knew she was being watched, as if she had trained every gesture. On the night of the third day, Charles called. He said the material was ready and preferred to deliver it in person. They set up a meeting at the same cafe. Edouard left home saying he needed to pick up a shipment from the supplier, and he did. He sat at the table, and a few minutes later, Charles arrived with a folder. He handed it over with a serious look and said only, "You have the right to know." Edouard opened it right there. Inside the folder, there was a sequence of photographs. All in sharp color, with dates and times in the bottom corner. In at least 4 of them, Natalie appeared smiling, hugging a man Edouard didn't immediately recognize. But turning the next page revealed the face. Jason. The veterinarian from the city. Married, father of 2 young children. In the following photos, Natalie and Jason were at a roadside motel, entering together, leaving hours later. Everything was there. Impossible to dispute. The shock was immediate. Edouard didn't feel anger. He felt a strange emptiness. It was as if his body had been emptied of everything he believed. The image he had of his wife, of his life, of the marriage, of the peaceful routine, suddenly seemed like a constructed scenario. It was hard to accept that she had used exactly what made her most admirable, the love for animals, as a curtain to hide something so dirty. Even harder was imagining the coldness in her eyes every night, pretending that everything was as it always was. He didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the way it was built. Jason was married. Just like Natalie. And yet, they found time to live a lie on top of 2 families. The shelter, which once represented hope, now became the stage for lies. Edouard thanked the detective, paid the agreed amount, put the evidence in his backpack, and left the cafe without saying anything else. Getting into his car, he remained for several minutes with his head resting on the steering wheel. He wanted to understand when his life had deviated so far from what he believed. The silence inside was absolute. After a while, he took a deep breath, started the engine, and headed home. On the way, he didn't make plans, didn't rehearse speeches, didn't prepare for confrontations. He just drove. Every mile traveled was a confirmation that the man who existed before the photos had stayed in the cafe. The one returning home was someone else. Someone who had lost something essential but still had enough dignity to not live within a lie. Edouard had just placed the folder with the photos in the passenger seat and was preparing to start the car when his phone vibrated. It was Natalie. Her voice sounded normal, calm, as if nothing was happening. She said she was going directly to the shelter, that some puppies had been left at the door, and that she might take a while to get home. Edouard replied with a simple, "Okay," without changing his tone. He put the phone in his pocket and, for a few moments, sat still with his eyes fixed on the road ahead. That call only reinforced what the photos showed. While he carried the weight of the truth, she continued pretending everything was the same. On the way back, Edouard felt his heart weigh down. Natalie's calm voice was almost cruel. He recognized that tone. It was the same one she used when talking about a rescue, when mentioning the name of a new puppy, when saying she needed more space at the shelter. And thinking that, in so many instances, he had taken pride in it. The woman he loved, lying so easily, for so long. Arriving home, Edouard dropped his backpack by the door and stood there for a while, as if trying to decide what to do with all of that. He got a glass of water, went upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed, but didn't even take off his shoes. The unease grew. He stood up and went downstairs again. He looked at the clock, just over half an hour since the call. He grabbed his car keys and left. The decision was made. He needed to look her in the eyes. Hear her try to explain. See how far she would go with that lie. So he headed to the shelter. The front of the shelter was all locked up, no lights on, complete silence. He parked the car right in front of the main gate and stood there watching for a few seconds. He took out his phone and called. She answered quickly, as if she wasn't expecting any conflict. "Are you at the shelter?" he asked, direct. "Yes. I'm here. I just got here a little while ago." "The puppies are pretty weak," she said, without hesitation. "Then come out here. I'm in front. I need to talk to you." Silence took over the line. He could hear her breathing. It was the sound of someone caught off guard. A pause long enough to confirm what he already knew. "Not now," she replied, trying to stay composed. "I'm taking care of one of the puppies. It's really bad." "Then open the door. I'll come in. We can talk inside." More silence. She took a deep breath, as if trying to gain time. I can't now. Seriously." "Okay then. I'll stay here. Until you come out. Even if it takes the whole night." He hung up. Leaned back in the car and crossed his arms. That was already enough. Her words, the delays, the diverted glances, the disappearances, the ready-made excuses. Now, the refusal to open the door. It was a theater. A role she played perfectly. But every play loses control eventually. 15 minutes later, the headlights of a car lit up the street and parked next to Edouard's vehicle. It was her. The face he had known for so many years. Natalie got out slowly, holding the key in one hand and the phone in the other. She was tense, but tried to keep her voice steady. "I got confused. I was somewhere else. Taking care of the puppies, but at a farm. A friend asked for help. My head is full these days." Edouard observed for a few seconds without saying anything. He pointed to the passenger seat. She got in. She didn't say anything else. She was restless, looking around, unable to fix her gaze on him. Edouard then zipped open the backpack, pulled out the brown envelope, and handed it to her without saying a word. Natalie took it with both hands, opened it slowly, as if she already knew what was inside. With each photo she turned, her expression changed. Her breathing became irregular. Her eyes filled with tears. She turned to him with a choked voice, no longer able to hide. "I'm sorry. It happened. I didn't plan it." Tears ran down her face. Her shoulders trembled. But Edouard kept looking forward, as if everything was already decided within him since the moment he saw the first photo. Edouard remained silent for a few seconds, looking ahead as if finishing a thought. Then he turned the key, started the car, and pulled away. Natalie, still with red eyes, tried to figure out what was happening. "Where are you going?" "My car is there," he replied, without looking at her. "We'll be back soon." She crossed her arms, pressed her lips, and didn't ask anything else. She knew, at this point, that anything she said wouldn't change the decisions he had already made. The road followed in absolute silence. Edouard drove steadily, without hesitation at any moment. He stopped the car in front of a house Natalie recognized. She recognized the facade, the gate, the number. Jason's house. She turned her face to him with wide eyes, as if only now realizing where they were. "Please, don't do this," she murmured, her voice choked. "That's enough, Edouard." But he had already gotten out of the car and gone to the doorbell. He rang once. Waited. Ringing again. Natalie got out of the car, went to him, and gently pulled his arm. "Let's go. Please. This will only hurt more people." Edouard didn't say a word. He just held the envelope with the evidence in his hands. The door opened. It was Jason's wife. Hair tied up, expression of exhaustion. She seemed confused to see Edouard there. Then she looked at Natalie, who was visibly shaken. "What's going on?" Edouard extended the envelope. "You need to know." She took the envelope without fully understanding. Edouard turned his back and went back to the car. Natalie hesitated for a second, then followed him. As they entered, he remained silent until he turned the corner. They arrived at her car. He parked beside it, with the engine still running. "Get out." She hesitated. He looked forward and added, "You don't live there anymore." Without anything to respond, she took the key from her purse and got out. Edouard left shortly after, without looking back. Natalie spent that night at a friend's house. In the following days, lawyers took over the communications. The divorce process was simple. The house, which was an inheritance from Edouard's father, remained with him. The grocery store also. What was left for Natalie were some joint investments, which, by agreement, were divided. Besides that, she had nothing. No support. No base. Jason's wife didn't remain idle either. After receiving the envelope, she confronted her husband, who initially tried to deny it, but eventually confessed. A few days later, she filed for separation. The scandal spread through the town at an alarming speed. The two betrayers, once seen as respectable, began to be avoided. Comments ran rampant everywhere, at the market, the beauty salon, the square, the church. Jason's clinic lost clients day by day. Within 2 months, he had to close it down. Natalie, without the structure Edouard provided, rented a small apartment and had to find a job. She had to learn to live on her own. For years, she had dedicated herself to the shelter, to volunteering, but now it was she who needed help. Months passed. Edouard continued with his life. The grocery store remained strong. The neighbors, who supported him from the beginning, continued to admire him. No one saw him making a scene. No one heard a single harsh word come from his mouth. And perhaps because of that, many learned from him. Because sometimes justice isn't done by shouting. It's done with firmness, truth, and dignity. And that's what remained of the story, the fall of those who pretended too much and the peace of someone who chose to move forward with his head held high. After everything came to light and the marriages ended, Jason and Natalie, perhaps by impulse, perhaps out of fear of being alone, tried to follow each other. They began to see each other more often, without needing to hide. They dined, watched movies, shared guilt in silence. For a few weeks, they acted as if they were building something new from the ruins. But the illusion lasted little. What was once done in secret, fed by risk and fantasy, was now exposed to the harsh light of reality. They no longer looked at each other with the same desire. Unwillingly, they began to compare each other to their ex-partners. Natalie missed the emotional stability of Edouard, the serenity with which he faced life. Jason, on the other hand, realized that Natalie was very different from his ex-wife, who always organized everything and kept the family balanced. What remained between them was an uncomfortable silence, full of regret and subtle demands. Small arguments began to appear. Minor misunderstandings became reasons for distancing. The glow that once blinded them no longer existed. And when they finally realized they weren't loving each other anymore, perhaps they had never truly loved, decided to step back without ceremony, without promises, without drama. They simply understood that what united them had been just a passing illusion. Natalie, now living on a modest salary at a pet food store, struggled to keep up with the bills. There was barely anything left by the end of the month. Responsibilities weighed heavily, and so did loneliness. After missing 2 months of rent, she called her mother and, with a choked voice, asked for shelter. She returned to the city where she was born, carrying her suitcase, her guilt, and the certainty that she had destroyed everything that mattered most. Jason, embarrassed by the rejection from the town and the failure of his clinic, also decided to leave. He opened a small veterinary clinic on the outskirts, a few kilometers away. He wanted to stay close to his children, whom he saw on weekends. He tried to start anew without fanfare, without looking back. The town that once admired him now only murmured his name in a tone of disappointment. In the end, each went separate ways, but carrying the weight of the choices they made. There was no reconciliation. Only the empty spaces left behind by broken trust and the life that, one day, was promising, until it was lost in the shadows of lies. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.